Recap. I'm back to the detailed design of the admin system, and just kind of working through the component descriptions and such. Account manager, rules access. Yeah, I finished up the work with the rules engine, or the rules utility and the validation engine yesterday. So I'm back into planning for that stuff, to build out the rest of the administrative system so that I'm not hanging on my email client waiting for sign up notifications and dealing with those manually when they happen. So I kind of deviate from the way other people that use this architectural method name their assemblies and so on. Simply because I've run into cases where if I follow that naming convention, the assembly name gets to be a mile long, and the operating system starts to complain about the length of the path and stuff like that, especially as you get into the assembly and you've got nested namespaces and so on. It gets silly quickly. So this will be a customer access dot abstractions. I'll need to include some way to access customer information from the following stores: Microsoft Entra ID and Azure Table Storage, replacement for SQL in this application. Gonna save. And I gotta update or fix fix that stuff. Don't want to have an intermediate fourth assembly between the abstractions and the collar. So the Entra stuff might become a utility or provider type assembly. I need to create MS Graph clients every so often. Maybe I need to add a components MS Graph repo. Excuse me. Now, component Details, concepts, images. I want to take a look at components real quick. And I'm looking at my diagram here. You see what I mean? Where this thing is just being a weirdo? It's being a total weirdo. Stop that. Copy. Close this window. I'm just going to open it in a new tab. There we go. And I want to take a look at, I can look down at the document here. So our account manager is going to come in, is going to validate for the action that's going on, and then it's going to execute some workflow once it's been validated. Now, customer access, most of the customer profile information is going to live in Microsoft Entra. And most of the subscription access stuff is going to happen in Lemon Squeezy and so on and so forth. But when things happen in Lemon Squeezy and eventually in Entra, I'm going to need those two systems to call into this to say, hey, set this up. Or this just happened in my system. You need to make adjustments in your local system and stuff like that. So we're going to have local representations of customers, subscriptions, etc., etc. And I'm just thinking about these different things. And how they will flow. And I thought I had. Hey, what's up, Scott? I am Rob, that developer dad. So thinking through my use cases, and I gotta find where I documented this stuff. Okay. External systems. Okay, here's some documentation about that stuff. Oh, gosh. Framework concepts. I may abandon these things. We'll see. I have MS Entra running. Just basically running Microsoft Graph queries against it, I believe, in the actual product. When I get to wrapping the graph queries that I'll need for this, I'll probably create some sort of facade layer or a flyweight pattern around Microsoft Graph, just because it's a beast, and I want to narrow it down to just the functionality that I need so that I don't have to trip over those concepts when I need to go back and add or change or what have you. MS Entra is really just a rebrand of Active Directory. I don't know why they changed its name. It's like everybody suddenly deciding that we're going to change pizza from pizza to Flurfnard. But whatever. Concepts, what are rules, component details. I know I had stuff fleshed out. Yeah, Azure Active Directory is basically, it's what Entra became, or where Entra came from. So not CustomerAccess. I have got my head so far up my butt this morning. It's not even funny. Create customer profile, save customer profile changes, load customer profile, manage customer subscription, okay. Public folder, only public interfaces and class definitions. Okay, this is where I was starting to get into the details a little bit. Customer profile, manage customer subscription. Trying to stay away from Azure. They do pay-as-you-go, and I can get out of it. You know what? So was I. And right now, my monthly hosting costs for the DM's Familiar, the highest was September, when I was doing a lot of AI inference, just as I was testing the application, as I was building the UI for it. And I think I ended up paying 19 cents for that month, because I'm using the free Azure App Service tier, which, I mean, it only really responds for an hour a day, but that was more than enough for the stuff I was doing. And it only counts the time that the app is actually bootstrapped and running. It doesn't count like downtime. I'm using the free tier of Azure SQL Database currently. But I've noticed that the Azure SQL Database, that free tier, it goes to sleep after, say, 5 minutes of inactivity. And then it takes like 30 seconds to a minute to spin back up and respond to requests again. Oh, yeah, AI voice in Azure? Oh, yeah. Yeah. You got to be really careful with that. Yeah, you get into those pay-as-you-go AI services, and it can get ridiculous. And that was one of the things that I discovered when I was researching the use of AI for enterprise apps for my former employer last fall. The conclusion that I came to was, if you can execute a task or workflow step or whatever, oh my God, yes, God. So if you can execute a task or a workflow step or some part of your system's stuff, if you can do it the old-fashioned way in C# and it works for what you need done, do it. Do it in code. Just invoke the AI when it's absolutely necessary to perform whatever step you have in your process that you're implementing. When the AI can do it better, faster, cheaper than it would be to develop the whatever it is step. For instance, taking a block of JSON data and humanizing that data into a narrative or a description or what have you. Generative AI is excellent at that. You can feed it a blob of JSON and it'll spit out a description of whatever that JSON object is. And it'll follow the directions for, the tone you want, how terse or loquacious you want it to be. And that's where generative AI really, really shines. I'll use image generation occasionally. Yeah. Doing your own AI website with ChatGPT API, that's a lot of fun. I have found that Azure's is about the same price, and Microsoft's terms of use and privacy policy are much more clearly spelled out than those policies are at OpenAI. I trust Microsoft a whole lot more than I trust OpenAI. Because even with the API, I don't trust that they're not ingesting the inbound API calls and using them for training data in the future. Now, granted, I haven't looked at the privacy policies or anything like that, but from what I've seen in the media, the corporate behavior at OpenAI is a little bit more wild, wild west than what we've come to expect from somebody like Microsoft or Apple or Google and so on. Okay, well, that's actually incredibly good to know. If I were hosting in, say, I don't know, Vercel or Heroku or one of the cheaper, more of course you have to opt out, or one of those free things that I'm not terribly familiar with and would probably require that I wrote my code in JavaScript or some crap like that. I'm a C# guy. I'm .NET through and through. I will use JavaScript under duress. Basically, if I can't do what I need to do with C#, like it's deep in the browser and Blazor ain't cutting it, I'll fall over to JavaScript. But I'm a .NET guy, and Azure's where I'm comfy. I'm super duper comfy in Azure, and I too have that same fear that costs could run away. So I've done things like put cost controls around my subscription, so that if the cost goes, or if my Azure bill is going to be higher than a certain amount, it just shuts everything off until the next billing period. And I've currently got that set at $20. When I take my product live, I'm gonna have to raise that a little bit. But and the AI stuff, I got educated enough on how to use it that I'm not that concerned about it, because my application has very, very, very tight control over the prompts that get submitted. You can't just fire up a chat with the AI in my app. What I'm using AI for is to enhance the data creation of these characters. So like I'll do a lot of random generation stuff first, where I'm just like generating random numbers and then picking from tables or picking from lists. And then once I've got those attributes sort of snap together like NPC Legos, I fire that at the AI with a fairly carefully constructed prompt, and the AI follows my instructions and gives me the output that I need. So yeah, opening up a chat UI to the AI is a really, really quick and easy way to make sure it's costing you more than you're bringing in on subscription fees. Because people will chat and chat and chat. So, CustomerAccess, Subscription Access, Shop Gateway, ProRater, Logger Factory. And I'm also metering every time somebody requests an NPC generation, and I'm storing a just sort of an audit log in my database of how many input tokens were used on that exact execution, how many output tokens came out on that execution, which model I used, and the name of the AI function that I invoked. I'm using semantic kernel, so I can actually harvest a lot of that information fairly easily. And I'm just keeping a log file of that stuff so that later on, once I've got actual user data, I can start to analyze patterns and see if I can find some optimizations to cut down on my costs. And currently I'm running the GPT-4o model because that's what was available in my Azure region when I was standing all of this stuff up. And I discovered a week or two ago that 4o Mini is available, and it's about to get an audition, because if I can switch over to 4o Mini for these use cases, that's going to reduce my costs by an order of magnitude. And that makes me very happy. Like having a busy development month go from 20 cents to 2 cents. Heck yeah. Absolutely. And I'm also getting ready to cut over from Azure SQL DB to Azure Table Storage, which is going to take my storage costs, assuming that I want 24/7 uptime, or as close to 24/7 uptime as you can get with cloud services. That kind of uptime using Azure SQL Database, even for the smallest, like least powerful CPU and memory, is somewhere between $300 and $400 a month to have it always on and ready to respond to requests. And that gives you like 32 gigs of storage. 10 gigs of Azure Table Storage is going to cost me less than 50 cents a month. And it's always on and always responding. So 50 cents versus $300 to $400. And I don't need like foreign keys and indexes and all that crap. I'm storing objects and associating those objects to users, and that's it. I don't need a relational database for this thing. So why pay for it? Why use it when I could just use Azure Table Storage is essentially NoSQL. It's got some indexing features, like there's partition keys and row keys and timestamps and stuff like that, so I can slice and dice each table into whatever. But then it just basically stores a blob, a structured blob for each partition. It's super nice. So CustomerAccess. Let's come back to CustomerAccess MD. And I gotta come in here. And that dovetails back into what I'm doing here. Now there's a reason I'm using Entra or Active Directory as my user store for this product, Scott. And it's because I don't want to store any personally identifiable information in my code. I'm comfortable writing code to read and write that information to some service, but I don't want to have to maintain and secure like a database or storage account or what have you. I don't want that information stored in any kind of mechanism that I'm responsible for securing or responsible for making sure is secure. So I'm using Entra. It's basically Active Directory, and Microsoft is taking care of all of that security nonsense for me. In fact, I've got my Entra set up so that one human can access it, and one or two processes running in Azure are allowed to talk to it. and I'm using Entra Managed Identity, which gets rid of, as long as you're living in Azure, if you use Managed Identity, you don't need, you don't have to store API keys. You don't have to store client secrets. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get rid of. I'm not using an API key between my application and the Azure AI service. The application just runs as this identity, and I told the AI service, let that identity in. And I don't even have the password for that identity. Microsoft rotates it for me every so often. I think I have it set to 60 days. But I've never seen that password. It's pretty sweet. So yeah, I need to include some way to access customer information from the following stores: Azure Table Storage, the schema of the customer objects to be stored is TBD and will initially be loosely based on the customer object defined by the Lemon Squeezy API. It's gonna be, well, the audience of this application is gonna be me and several third-party web services on the internet. One of those web services eventually will be Entra. The primary audience for this API, or for this system that I'm building right now, is going to be Lemon Squeezy's payment processing stuff. When a customer goes to sign up a new subscription or alter their subscription, Lemon Squeezy's going to send a webhook call to my system, and my system is going to handle adjusting things like quotas and so on and so forth for that webhook call. The audience of the application that I am building this to administer, the actual product, is going to be dungeon masters, people that run D&D games. I originally started it as basically just an example of how I go about building software, and then it got useful because I run D&D and my players are asking me all the time, so what's the blacksmith's name? Hey, Mr. Blacksmith, what do you have any kids? Where did you come from? How did you grow up? Blah, blah, blah. All these crazy details that I haven't prepared in advance. So I'm having to burn brain cycles at game time to come up with these character details, and I forget them as soon as they're out of my mouth. I'm basically a large language model myself. And so they'll come back to the village a couple of sessions later, and they're like, oh, hey, let's go visit this guy. And I'm like, I have to look at my wife, who, thank God, is my note taker, and say, who's that? And she's like, blacksmith. Oh, okay. So I figured if I started off by saying, well, let's just see if I could build like a random NPC generator just from lists and dice. And I did that. I was like, this is kind of cool. So what? I wonder, well, I know it'll be easy for me to chuck this at an LLM and bring it back and say, oh, look, here's a character. And then I stored it, and then I showed it to some of my players, and they were like, ooh, I want this. So I've spent the past few months getting it ready to share with other people. And it's led me down all kinds of paths, like writing line of business software and crap like that. Have you been around for any of the streams I've done in the past week or so? Because this might be something you'd be interested in. Here, let me pop this open, and I'll go to code. I'll come down to component rules. And I should actually review this thing. So I built a validation engine and a rules description and execution utility. And it lets me create sets of validation rules that are stringly typed, is the term I'm using. Yeah. That's right. So I was doing a little bit of reflection stuff, but I actually got it done. And I'll just run my unit tests real quick. I guess I should probably build it. Build. Okay, yeah. Since then, like through the last time you were here and yesterday morning, I had basically finished it. It's sitting in a repository. I've got the ability to describe rules as an easily serializable and stored class. And those are just basic, simple rules that return a true or a false. You pass an object in that the rule's been configured to run against, and it sends back, yes, this object passes the rule, no, this object fails the rule. Then I decorated that with a validation rule over in the validation engine. And let me just run all of these. And then I'll step through 2 of the validation tests so you can see all the setup and all that stuff. What's it used for? So think about this. You've written validation code in the past, right? And you know, when you're getting ready to do some business activity with, say, a customer object, you have to validate the customer object, or you have to validate the information that came in, right? Okay, yeah, I've not used Fluent validation, but you're hard coding those rules, right? You're this property is greater than some value, this property is greater than some other value, etc. And you know those rules change all the damn time, right? So what this does, if we take a look at the validation rule class, it accepts a simple rule. Yeah, basically like that.
Oh, my coffee cup.
So this lets you describe. This might be a better way of showing it.
Looks like this one.
This system condenses all of those rules down to basically stringly typed definitions. So we identify the activity context, and that's how you link a particular rule with an object type that's undergoing some activity. Because I'm sure as you're aware, you would have different rules for canceling a subscription than you would creating a new subscription, than you would renewing a subscription, so on and so forth, right? But they're all operating on the subscription object. That's the subject of the rule or the process. And then the activity context is the thing that you are doing in that use case that you've implemented. So we just name the activity context here. We name the type of the subject, give it a failure message, and a rule definition. The rule definition, again, is just a stringly typed definition of that logic. And because it's stringly typed, you can store these things in a database. No more hard coding things. Store it in a database, a file, whatever. And then you would write a access for whatever technology you're using for that storage. And your manager class instantiates a validator. And the execution is dead simple. Create a new validator. Pass in an instance of your subject. Name the activity context. And out comes the result. That's illustrated in here. And that runs all of the validation rules on that subject for that activity, and then returns a validation result, which has your original subject unmodified and a collection of property errors. It's pretty handy. I got really sick of hard coding the rules implementation and the consequences and stuff like that, because I would have to go in and crack open the code base and change them all the damn time as the business folks would say, oh no, now we need to do this and now we need to do that. With this, I go to the storage area, alter the rule definition, maybe add one, maybe take one away, and I'm done. That's it. It takes that volatility out of my code and just turns it into a variability. Now, it doesn't work for like really exotic business rules where you got to do like multi-step stuff, but it can be extended to that. I could very easily set up a compound rule that's a collection of rules that are all anded together. And one of the things that I do need to figure out sooner than later with a rule, instead of this, let's take a look at a rule definition. Nope. Let's close this. So instead of this comparison constant, instead of actually passing a value, I want to figure out how to pass a pointer to another different object property of the correct type, of course, or of, a convertible type. But I want to be able to pull this instead of storing it in the database. I want to give it a maybe a comparison pointer or whatever, and have it exist as a function to extract the value to use for a comparison constant. I'm not sure. I haven't put that much thought into it yet because I haven't actually needed it, but I suspect I'm going to soon. So when I do, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. But yeah, this whole thing, stuff it into a file, stuff it into a database, whatever. Oh, pointers? Really, you're just passing a reference to the to a property or a reference to a function or whatever. Like in C#, that's what we do, is we pass the instance.property name in the parameter list, or we pass instance.method name or what have you if you want to do a method pointer. And behind the scenes, it creates the pointer and passes that instead. We don't have to deal with that stuff because that's all been abstracted away from us by C#, and thank God, because pointers give me migraines. I've never successfully learned how they actually work and how to deal with them. Anytime I've tried to learn C or C++, I fail myself out at as soon as I get to having to deal with pointers and all of that crap. The memory management and just gross. Do not enjoy it. For the purposes of storing and retrieving the customer object, we'll have a public definition declared customer access customer profile. I'm just going to have customer dot profile dot subscription history, and I'm smelling a customer builder that will be used by the account manager. Yeah. And I feel like it's going to need to exist as... Oh, what the deuce am I doing? Let's commit these changes. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to cancel these changes so I don't commit old stuff over my new commit. And just taking a quick peek at this guy. So I've got my account manager. I feel like I'm going to need a customer builder. As an engine. No, it's going to be an internal class on account manager. Customer builder, internal class within the account manager. So let's take this. You're out of here. Commit those. Yeah. Come over to account manager. Interfaces, public enum action kind, implementations. Let's edit. Internal customer builder .cs responsible for using the manager's resource access components, component instances to retrieve and build a fully formed customer object retrieves the pieces of a customer from the different resources, converts, and uses them to build a manager local build the idiomatic representation of the customer object as required by the account manager. Save. So it's going to do the retrieving and mapping. That customer builder thing. All right, back to CustomerAccess. Let's edit. All implementations of CustomerAccess will have a dependency on the MS Entra wrapper component and implement the storage activities, storage tasks against a specific storage tech, i.e. SQL Server, files, table storage, etc. This application will only implement against Azure Table Storage. But I'll have the flexibility to re-implement against SQL Server excuse me, later if I decide to migrate back to SQL Server. Let's preview. Commit. All right. I think we there. At least for CustomerAccess, I've made the notes that I want to make. Excuse me. So, I think we can call this a relatively productive session. I need to go eat something. I need to pull my head out of my butt. I've been very scattered. But Scott and I had some really cool discussions about all kinds of stuff, AI usage, and so on and so forth. It's usually 1 hour. I try to keep it to 1 hour, 10 to 11, and then 1 to 2 Eastern. Occasionally, like if I get on a roll, I did a 2 hour last week, and that was a lot, man. That was a lot. Yeah, typically I try to keep it to 1 hour so that I've got time to get things described and posted and so on and so forth. I only occasionally work on these projects outside of my stream time because I do want to show how the code gets writ. I've got all of the building the rules engine stuff, well, almost all of the building the rules engine stuff, archived over on my YouTube channel. The rules engine itself has its own GitHub repository. It's public. It's MIT licensed. If you're curious, go take a look at it, and you might actually find some utility for it in your own projects. And then if you discover that it's really useful in your own projects, go ahead and bring it to work. It's MIT licensed, fully open source. Grab it, copy it, change it, use it for commercial purposes, whatever. I'm putting it out there because it's going to be useful to me in this admin thing. I'm already imagining uses for the rules utility in the actual DM's helper application, especially if I get into things like an encounter tracker or an encounter runner, where it takes in like the player character's hit points, armor class, initiative, and then has the same stuff for whatever critters they're having the encounter with. And then it'll automatically sort the initiative, and I'll say, okay, so Ferd, what are you doing this turn, and they'll say, I'm going to attack that goblin with my short sword. And I'm like, okay, roll to hit. The AC to beat is 13. Okay, great. You did 3 points of damage. And I'll just update that goblin's hit points. And if they get more damage than they got, it'll cross them out and skip them next time around, that kind of thing. Really just all that stuff that can really screw up the flow of a D&D session by having to flip back and forth through the monster manual and having to like scribble down on a piece of paper who's got how many hit points left and all that stuff. It's a lot of stuff for a DM to keep track of. And if I can automate that somehow later, that's not a current feature of the DM's familiar. It's one of the future features I'm considering. But yeah, like I could see the rules executor having some utility for things like that later on. So yeah, I'm gonna bounce. I'll be back around 1-ish, and we'll continue describing these different components. And then I think it's gonna be time to start standing up a Visual Studio solution. So I'll be back at 1. Hopefully, Scott, if you're available, you can join in and follow along. If not, I'll see you next time. I'm always happy to see you pop in, man. Take care of yourself. Happy coding, folks.